so we have one topic of discussion this evening. Facilities plan, Y. Dr. Broke, take it away.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit here. I think anyone who was present at the meeting, the last meeting we had, is pretty familiar because we had Plan X, and the only difference between Plan X and Plan Y is the fact that there is the portables are taken out for Plan Y, and overall cost of $80,000. The neighborhoods recommended for some boundary adjustments are the same. There's no change in the neighborhoods. And so Plan X was portables for both schools, Summit View and Apple Valley, and Plan Y is no portables. The one thing I do want the board to be well aware of is if there is a school that probably could use a portable because of the way that their instructional program has been negatively impacted and could be more positively impacted as we move forward, that would be Summit View if the board compromised to one school with one portable. If we make that decision, we also would have a better place to locate a portable over there as well. So that's the difference between Plan X and Plan Y, and that's it.
Why are we going from 2 to 1? Do we have room not to have one in Apple Valley?
Well, this is just a different recommendation, Dave. This is the one with none. But if there was gonna be considering one, I would say that Summit View of the two, if there was a compromise or something like that. But basically, recommendation X is 2 portables, one at each school. Recommendation Y is no portables. But if we were gonna look at which school would be able to use one because of their program, would be Summit View.
Well, that, and unless I've been totally misinformed, Apple Valley, excuse me, Heidi, but at this point doesn't have any real usable space to locate a portable. So, in having, thought about this since our last meeting and all that, I kind of was hoping we could kind of mesh X and Y and go with one portable and put it at Summit View at this point.
If it were in Summit View, where would it go?
Jim and Eva have looked at some places.
Just north of the existing one, kind of where the tether balls are right now.
Okay.
Next to-
On the other side of the entrance, back entrance.
Dr. Brophy, I'm pretty sure I know your answer to this, but can you explain your rationale why you think Summit View more than the other?
Yeah, because their instructional program, Eva, why don't you speak to that? If you would, please. Sharing rooms, things like that, yeah.
Right now, my resource room and my speech, they share a space, and lab has one classroom with 5 people working at tables in an area much smaller than this, and much smaller than a normal classroom, so the other half of the library. And I would love to either give lab both sides of the portable so that those 128 kids could be served. And that would be able to free me up to separate speech and resource, because that's especially those speech kiddos, it needs to be such a quiet environment for the SLP to be working with these kids. And it's a space issue to just help fully support some of the neediest kids at Summit.
Did I mishear you the other day, Eva, when you stated, I think, that for special testing that comes in, like vision, dental, all that stuff, you put them in a vault?
We finished up our hearing testing in the vault. And I don't know, you guys probably don't know the vault. Literally it's the safe in the office but it was the only quiet space we could find to finish this up.
It's pretty quiet
Well, it's quiet if I'm not in the office.
Or if they close the door.
She got locked locked-in ones.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, if you close the door, it's pretty quiet in there.
yeah, we got locked in. Actually, like, we didn't think it locked from the inside, but apparently.
Any,
Thank you, Eva, appreciate it.
I guess I have a follow-up question to that, if I
Sure.
could. So if it were to go to some of you, would it require any special outfitting or anything unusual other than just the cost of the
Tim?
portable?
Well, it depends on if we go with the wet portable, a dry portable, or the other idea of making it a library. Of course, the wet portable's gonna have a long sewer run all the way back down to almost, Chestnut. And the water's close, but that requires more effort, more cost. So, you gotta put security and fire here.
What would you recommend? Library or classroom?
Eva?
Yeah, that's not my call.
Yeah.
I'm not quite ready to answer that question. I would love to have my library back, but if it's more cost effective and more prudent use of taxpayers' dollars to make the portable a library, we can make that work.
Well,
It's just a decision whether we get the portable or
yeah, the
not.
portable would be the equivalent of two classrooms. Am I
classrooms.
not correct in that? I think that's what we were looking at.
Correct.
So does the library have to be that large?
Yes. I did not fully understand the impact of putting the library, cutting it in half, that would be on the school. We just lost a lot of very valuable community space, intervention space. Even when the classes go to the library, Mrs. Golden, you might be able to talk to this, they can't, you check out a book and there's really not even a space to sit down and read.
Because they had to move the shelf, it's really small. They had to move the shelf like in the middle, where before most of the shelving is on the outside, so there's shelving on the outside now. So then you walk in and those shelves have to go in the middle, because we lost, I think, a great deal of the book had to be surplus too.
We greatly reduced the circulation.
So, but there still has to be books for K through 4, and so it's really pretty crowded in there. She does a very good job with the space she has.
With the portable out there, you want to take the wall down in the library? And that
Yes,
would-
and I asked him, guys, they did such a fabulous job, but I said, please make this so that it'll be easy to take it out for someday when I can have this space back.
So, cost is pretty, and then Heidi, a few meetings back, we talked about and threw back and forth, a portable or not a portable, and you actually preferred to take that space, the library, and still go ahead and divide it as opposed to?
Preferred, I think it's like I said, I think it's the least of the worst. We have portables now, and as I was just telling Mr. McMurray, having those children walk in and out constantly is dangerous. I mean, ours is going to have to go in front of our gym, between the gym and our parking lot, right?
Oh, in that
Between
grass
in and
area?
Or on that front playground. I mean, so you're having all those children right at your parking lot, because it's not fenced. So there's a security of the children in and out. And again, whether wet or dry, the only restroom facility we have close to that is our one little office bathroom, one toilet. That is a constant hassle, and it's just inconvenient.
So, are you turning, so you don't want a portable?
So I'm saying if we put it in the library, I have kids contained, which is what our goal is. So the library contains kids into a building, and on a safety feature that is more, it's less problematic, excuse me. I mean, they're inside, there's restrooms inside. The amount of accident reports we endured last year, kids and teachers falling on that ice out there.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to sell me on it.
Yeah, I know.
Terrible.
But I'm telling those people
You
who
know.
don't understand our two buildings.
Right.
Who might be on the audience.
So, given the option, you would just go ahead and do the construction and go without a portable, right?
Yeah.
Okay. so let's play this out. Okay, so we don't put a portable on there now. We try and pass a bond in 19, right? Is that where we're looking?
No, we're not going backwards.
2020. We don't get one. Now you need a portable. It's a little more expensive.
Sure.
I mean,
Maybe
let's.
we had it, you know, our library is built a little bit larger than Summit View.
Oh, a lot bigger.
Lot bigger. So I know Tim and I have looked, and I think if you were to really completely get rid of it, I think you could get 3 classrooms. We could get 1 or 2 and still have a little library left.
But a function. So I saw Eva at Summit View when she told me that they were going to turn the boiler room into a classroom, and I just couldn't get that in my head. And I saw the library, and that really hit me. I mean, can you keep a functional library there? Because what's at Summit View right now in their library is not functional.
Sure. If we did 1 classroom, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
And I heard Eva, well, she didn't say it outright, but what I'm hearing for the, proponent of the 2 classrooms for library is, it's also a community meeting space that, for that particular area, they're really limited. And so that would be another reason for me anyway, to support a portable at Summit View at this point in time. Even though that's not on recommendation why.
So I just want to make sure I have a good picture here. So portable at Summit View, would it be a library, or would it in a classroom, or 2 classrooms?
That's to be determined.
That's to
Okay,
be
Yeah,
determined.
depending on space and how we're gonna best use it.
And also cost, if I have to put the library out there, because then it doesn't have to be a wet portable,
is it big enough?
and it's way bigger than the library I have now.
Well, and I think, that would be, at least to this board member, that would be a decision that would have to be made by the 5 of us up here and Eva on what she determines is the best use of that. And taking into consideration, obviously, the cost of the whole project. I don't think it's something that, without further discussion and stuff, we could decide right here.
Well, and I don't think we're
No, we're not. I know.
here to decide that today.
I'm just trying to sway you to my viewpoint.
No, I know. Well, and I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the cost benefit analysis of the wet portable versus the dry portable, and then trying to put a value on that as it pertains to your needs at Summit View in terms of what's the best use of the district's funds for a dry portable that's going to be a library space, or is that, and then turning the existing library into classrooms, is that more desirable? Because if we're talking about the difference between a dry portable and a wet portable not being a dramatic difference in cost, then we need to know that, or at least I need to know that. And then I guess, and this is just what my common sense tells me is that it would be a modular building at Summit View that is a dry modular building, I would think is easier to transport to another location than a portable that's plumbed. I could be completely, pardon the pun, all wet about that, but that's just what my common sense would tell me. Those would be some things that I would kind of want to know as we're honing in on this decision of 350,000, or is it something that's different that as far as the cost? But that's at least in my mind, those are all of the factors that I think I'd like to know to kind of help us come to the right decision.
I just know that we need to provide the best learning environment possible for our most vulnerable kids.
Right, but I don't I don't disagree with that. That's why it's, just because it's the cheapest option doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best.
Exactly.
That's why we have to do the cost-benefit analysis.
Thank you.
You'll have to forgive me if this information is outdated. What's the cost of the remodel?
To disconnect the sewer and the water supply.
Yeah.
Two options in the library.
4 pipes.
We haven't done,
No.
cost.
With oversimplification, that's about what it amounts
I think if we do it timely for our crews, we're probably looking at 25 to 30,000 in contract, but you can double that.
And then, there was a question about whether the city will, tell us whether we have to have a wet, if we have to have wet portables. Is that right?
They will, there's a formula based on how many male and how many females, it's a formula that has to be worked out. And just looking at it real close with all the individual bathrooms and classrooms, some of you, we're probably okay, for a dry one, it's just more of a convenience item. We have to sit down and really do the numbers.
If it was a library, from
A library, I would think could be dry. You're looking at two different portables. If you go with a library portable, the construction's a little different. They beef up the flooring to handle the weight of the book, so you have to kind of order, you either want a library or you want a classroom.
And then no wall, right?
No wall.
Is that still below the 350 though? If it's a
I would think so.
That's I'm just hearing something for the first time. That's an interesting thing that you just said, that it would have to be a library portable or it would have to be a classroom portable.
I can, yeah.
That,
Or by the library built, when with the wall, maybe by the wall.
right, but my thought process is that if we had a modular that was for a library, and the idea is that hopefully when the time comes that we pass a bond, that it could be moved to another school, that school may or may not need, that modular building may or may not be conducive for a library type space. And so if the idea is that we needed to move that modular building to another facility that needed classrooms, again, the cheapest is not necessarily the best. I should say the least expensive, not the cheapest.
Eva, there's no way your library can be made into 2 regular teaching classrooms, is there? It's too small. It's just used, your library that was divided.
Okay, wait,
Your library that was divided is too small to be 2 regular sized classrooms?
not classrooms, absolutely.
Exactly, it's too small. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right.
You don't want to use the portable as classrooms.
Right.
Yes.
So then essentially we're saying that.
The portable would be
portables
classrooms.
Has to be classrooms.
Yeah, because the
almost.
library is not big enough to be 2 classrooms. Yeah.
Well, that could eliminate the reinforcement of the floor issue as well.
Okay, so if I do my math right, the Summitview boiler room remodel is $80,000.
Correct.
Apple Valley remodel, highball at 40. Is
60.
that way out of range?
How much?
40,000?
If we can get our crews to do it,
Is that a permitting issue also?
we will have to have it in.
Well, no, I mean, what's the determining factor between whether your guys do it or whether it's contracted?
Timing, how fast we need it, we don't have large construction crews to go in and do that big of a job.
Might have to bid it out, so.
Yeah, more than likely, I would say we'd have to bid it, and then even the boiler room right now, that's a ballpark estimate for $80,000. Pricing just keeps going up and up every day we wait, so.
Right.
we'll-
Okay, so if we go at 90 for the boiler room and 60,000 for the Apple Valley remodel, $350,000, we all feel pretty, you feel pretty safe with that number, right?
And that would be probably with the site prep, and all the permitting and the architect. That should be a pretty good number for a wet. And if I remember right, the price of portable is about $10,000 difference from a wet.
So that's 500,000 for recommendation Y, right?
Well, as
Ballpark figure,
Ballpark
yep.
figure.
As modified.
Yeah, if we modify it to what I was suggesting it is, would be pretty close.
And that gets Apple Valley 2 classrooms? 1 classroom. And no portable.
One for now.
Okay.
And I'm confused, but I guess we're saying not, the portable at Summit View that would be put on asphalt would be 2 classrooms and not a library.
Correct. The other issue is we're at the 8-month mark is when school starts. It takes 9 months to get this done. So we need to pull the proverbial trigger on the portable. Right, Tim?
It sounded a lot like coercion.
We're going away from 2 portables because we've now decided that Summit View doesn't really need one. Is that right?
No, it's
Other way
the
around.
opposite.
Apple
Oh, yeah.
Apple Valley does not really need one. They can survive without a portable. If you look at the number of unhoused kids, or spaces we have, that makes sense.
Other questions or from the board members? Before I ask if anybody in the audience that's come tonight would like to ask any questions.
Or modify any of our recommendations.
All right, well, I'll open up to anybody in the audience that wishes to speak with the board about the discussion to this point. And don't all speak at once. Go ahead, sorry.
Stephen Robertson, for those who don't know me. So, I'm speaking as a parent, not as a member of the facilities committee, but something that we were discussing on Thursday night was the timing of the bond and potential redistricting with the various plans. The table is actually still on the board back there, and if we run a bond in 2020 like we were talking about, and it passes, then we'd be redistricting again in 5 years. The question is there a proposal on the table that would allow it to, I mean, we would, not speaking to the uncertainties of the future, but with reasonable probability to be able to avoid another redistricting within the 5-year time span so that we can not have to move kids as often.
Is one of these ones, one that we won't have to do it in 5
Is there a
years?
proposal on the table is what I'm asking.
No, there's not. Stephen, you
Why
know
isn't
that.
there a proposal on the table that might satisfy that?
Well, I think the proposals X and Y would be able to get us 3 or 4 years, probably not 5. So,
See, and the elephant in the room, Mr. Robertson, is that regardless of which of these plans we settle on and what we do now for the short term, I'll guarantee you, we're gonna have to redistrict, a major redistricting later down the road. Whether it be 5 years, 6, 7, or 8, we don't know that at this point, because I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't think the rest of these
yeah,
folks.
one of the things, this is my 7th year, Stephen, and we have not rebounded one time. Where I came from, I was there 5 years, we did 2 major reboundary efforts. And they're fairly common when districts have issues trying to pass a bond issue, and you have a massive amount of people moving in. They're fairly common, and that's why it's important that you work hard on having a common instructional program everywhere, common curriculum, all, you know, throughout, so that regardless of where a kid goes, they're gonna be exposed to the same set of standards and everything. So, we've been fortunate that we haven't, if we'd have grown faster, we'd have been talking about this before. But I would say, and if you, we can probably get 3 or 4 more years with the recommendations that are here at 2% growth, which is a good rate.
What's the, I know we haven't talked about Z yet, but because it's utilizing space that is currently unutilized by anybody, would that get us more time?
What space is that?
That would be the classrooms that are empty at the high school and freshman campus.
There's not enough classrooms empty here to accommodate
That
all of
wasn't my
them.
question.
Well, there aren't any empty spaces.
Yes, there are. The room we're standing in does not get used on a daily classroom basis.
What's that?
The room we're in now doesn't get used on a daily.
Yeah, but there's
class
not
basis.
enough, there's not 15 classrooms here.
Can I interject? My name's Brian People, by the way, and I do this a lot with school districts all up and down the valley. What you're talking about is bringing elementary students into a high school setting, which per code-wise is not allowed because you're on the second floor. And the young kids, there's definite size differences between high schoolers and 5th graders or 3rd graders, whatever you're looking at. And that would, I mean, there may be space here. However, we're not allowed to do that because those kids, fire code won't allow it.
Right.
So,
What the proposal
Brian,
that's
you're
on the
talking
table
about the
will be
ninth grade
discussed
coming
on
up here.
Wednesday.
well, even,
Yeah.
like I said, 9th grade could come up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right,
We just
but-
don't have 15 classrooms
You
here.
just, yeah, I know your floor plan.
Thank you, yeah.
But Stephen, I think the question was, is there a proposal on the table that gives a longer time span to
Right.
go with that?
No.
Well, not necessarily, I mean, Z is, I think the idea of the last plan that we were gonna talk about, where we're gonna discuss Wednesday, what's happening with, whether we're gonna be committed to K-4, or we want K-5. The idea behind that massive move, if we went back to a K-5 model, was to have a period of time where we wouldn't be looking at boundary changes. This is, the plan we're gonna talk about on Wednesday is very disruptive, it's expensive, and the outcomes have to be good for the students, and then some stability in the boundary change. You have to remember that these other 2 plans are, everyone I think up here and out there who's been here recognizes these are short-term solutions.
Right. So I'm just trying to point out though that, you know, if you're having to reboundary this year prior to levy, and then you're having to reboundary in 3 to 4 years, which is when you're running the bond, that could be problematic for passing vote.
It could also be problematic not to have room to move kids. If we don't do anything for 4 years, where are those bodies gonna go?
Oh,
You physically run-
I'm not saying that we shouldn't do anything. I'm just saying we need to give serious consideration to plans that are longer reaching, even if we decide not to go with those options, they need to be considered. That's what I'm saying.
You know, and I really talked to my wife about this, and I told her I wasn't gonna say anything. Talking about Plan Z is outside the box. And I'm starting to not like that phrase, because there's a reason we have a box. It's the long-standing, it is what we have done. And I don't want at this time for us to do a major redistricting and irritate, and I have a better word for that, but I'm saying irritate the patients of this district right before enrollment. It just doesn't make sense to me that we do a whole giant Z right now. And the other thing with Z is half the middle school will be half full. On Plan Z, the middle school is half full. What sense does that make? It's an elementary school that's half, right now we have 800 and some kids. And in Plan Z, we have 500. How does that make any kind of sense? I don't understand that. And so I think we need to stay with the box here for a while until we get other things figured out.
Thank you.
And for once, well, maybe more than once, I kind of agree with Mr. Jager in that we have, over the past, oh gosh, I lose track of that too, 8, 10, 12 years, tried to establish a continuum, if you will, in many of our programs, from elementary to the middle school, junior high, on up to here, Mr. McMurray's building, so that these kids can progress in an acceptable manner, a good learning environment, and the continuity. We've got, for instance, our music program, our band, and the bands here at the high school win all kinds of awards and competitions and those kind of things, but it starts down at the elementary and where they move. You disrupt those kids now, and it's gonna shoot that whole program in the foot, and that's, to me, that's not acceptable. We have to come up with, if we're gonna go into a longer range plan, we have to come up with something that fits in with the needs of all those programs and kids. Because right now, a major disruption of every one of them is gonna be very traumatic to the whole district. And then you will see some programs have to disappear, and they won't all be educational.
One just a reminder, speaking along the same lines, is based on the contract language for class size, we currently have room for 353 more elementary students. So the whole issue here isn't having too many kids, it's having too many kids in a couple places and not enough kids in 4 other places. So we've talked about, you know, trying to keep it simple, make a simple move now, try not to disrupt too many people now. Try to do this as simple as possible. Still provide, opportunities to think down the line of what we have coming, but not make it so disruptive that it disrupts a lot of people at this time. We've got a great program, and I think we have we got a levy in February. We need to get that. We need to focus on the positive, focus on the good things we're doing, and get that behind us, and work with our citizens group and look at a bond issue in 19 or 20, maybe in 2020, when the things change as far as the funding, where it goes. And if we, for example, passed a new Apple Valley and a new Summit View, that adds 400 more kids. That puts us at 753 capacity over the next few years. And so I just think that Plan X, Plan Y, and 2 modifications are presented in 2 different ways, but are trying to make slight modifications to what we're currently doing and leaving things pretty much the same as best we can in the meantime.
Just to be clear, I don't believe that Z is the right option either. I just feel like it is at least an attempt to try and achieve something that is thinking longer term. And, you know, we have a problem with being myopic in this district, where we're not looking at the long term. I don't think we would have built the middle school the way we did if we were thinking long term. I don't think we would have done the freshman campus if we were thinking long term. I think we would have done completely different things, gotten something that would have fit the district's needs better if we were thinking long term when those projects were done.
But it doesn't do any good to look back now. We've got what we got, Stephen. I mean,
trend in history.
yeah, we've got what we got.
We've gotten to where we're here now because of
Right.
short-term planning, and here we are discussing more short-term planning.
There again, Mr. Robertson, you've got, look, we don't have a crystal ball,
Oh, I
you
understand
know?
that.
And hindsight's an exact science. Unfortunately, trying to look into the future's not.
Oh, I'm well aware.
So that's why we're dealing with this the best way we know how at this point in time.
So I was going to say 2 things along with the crystal ball idea is that I think it would be awesome if we knew precisely the order in which every development in the West Valley School District was going to occur. Because if it did, then we could have a clear direction. We don't know that. We know where the developments might be. We know where there's some infrastructure right now.
General idea.
We have no idea how fast those developments will or will not be built. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be forward-thinking. It doesn't mean that we should put our head in the sand and hope that, gosh, I hope nothing bad happens and hope for the best. But this would be a lot easier if we knew precisely the order of which every new building in West Valley or new development in West Valley was going to happen and when it was going to happen on the timeline. But we don't know that. Thinking about the proposed attendance areas, I think why this is such a weighing decision on at least this board member is because of the significant impact. And I said this in the spring, and I've said it a few different times. I wish my kids were elementary students and I wish it was still elementary students, because I would have absolutely no issue with my children that went to Apple Valley going to another elementary school in our district. Absolutely none. And I'm a little bit biased because I sit up here, but I can say for a fact that when I was going through the West Valley School District at Apple Valley, I don't necessarily believe that was the case. That was a long time ago, and the strides that we've made are very positive. And that's something that a lot of the people that are sitting in the audience are a part of today and are to be congratulated. In terms of X and Y, but we're talking about Y tonight, in terms of the actual boundary areas that we are considering, as I look at these, one of the things that I shouldn't say I like, but at least I can somewhat tolerate is at least the areas that we're moving, and one of the ones that I'm thinking of in particular is north of 80th, west of 74th, and then to 96th, is that even though that where the houses are now, some of those houses are established, if you will, West Valley neighborhoods, we have newer developments, newer houses that are not necessarily tied to the school. And so from, again, one of the considerations, not the consideration, but one of the considerations being transportation, we are not causing as much disruption to neighborhoods that we're not displacing kids in established neighborhoods for new kids and new developments that are not.
That's different than last spring.
Which is different than last
spring.
The proposals brought forth last spring, and that was really where I was having a hard time is we have new developments that are displacing established developments. So I did want to say that this evening, that even though and that's not absolutely the case across the board, but that is one piece of this that is more attractive to me than the proposal that was brought forth last spring. So those were just a couple of things that I wanted to say about that this evening.
I just have one question. In the facility committee's draft report, there was a suggestion about the district looking to purchase land for growth. Is that something that's in the horizon, or is that something we're waiting for 2020 for the bond to pass?
I'll speak for myself on that. In the facilities report, we asked Mr. Matthews about the recommendations, and that recommendation about acquiring land was item number 3, and everything that was after recommendation 2 were longer-term facilities planning type things that we need to look at. So in terms of, is it on the horizon? Absolutely. Does that need to be part of the facilities plan? At least from my perspective, as to, okay, what's the order of the bonds? How are we going to approach this from a systematic standpoint, and specifically, how much land, what type of land are we trying to acquire, and what are we trying to build on that land? All of those things, I think, are part of, hopefully, a strategic facilities plan. And I think that as we look at the desire of what is the right thing to do about plans X, Y, and Z in terms of our short-term issues, is trying to look at how are we going to address our short-term issues without at least for me, shooting ourselves in the foot for longer-term planning. And that doesn't necessarily, the acquisition of land is in there, but coming back to the recommendation is, in talking with Mr. Matthews last week about that, I wanted to have some crystallization as to his recommendations, and are those shorter term or longer term, as we now are trying to address the shorter term.
As part of the facilities committee that we talked about the land acquisition the other night, it is exactly like Mike said. We've got to figure out the short term first, but we're always, I think, always looking at where we can get some land also. It's not like we wait until we pass a bond levy before we start looking for land. I think we're always looking for a desirable spot, and we'll jump on it whenever we get a chance. But we've got a couple elementaries to get built, or at least one to get built before that. And but it's not something that we're sitting back on at all.
I struggle with, I mean, just from a practical standpoint, and maybe this exists out there, but I struggle with where do we find a 45, a 15-acre site or even a 45-acre site. That's not to say that we shouldn't look or that we shouldn't consider it, but the simple solution is well, we go out and buy an orchard. Well, orchard land is extremely expensive right now. So a lot of just, and then of course we've got other land that developers want to turn into housing developments and multifamily. So it's the topography of West Valley makes at least from my perspective, makes finding a big site. That's going to be a challenge for us, I think.
Just to verify, the property that we own when there's a transportation lot up there is not usable due to water rights and that sort of thing for building any type of.
I don't know that.
Oh.
I don't know when it's been tested. I don't know any of that. No, I don't
We
know.
do own all that by where the busing.
Yeah, transportate that area by the comes out to the Tannum Road. Yeah, I don't know the direct answer to that. Tasha.
We also own property near that's contiguous with Cottonwood.
Yeah. We were told that the land out by the bus garage does not have water rights.
Yeah.
And in order to get water rights, we would have to close down Atana and transfer water rights from Atana over there. We don't have water rights for that area, and you can't really buy them. You can transfer them, but you can't buy them. That's the story that I've got, at least.
Tim, do you have any information on that?
It's a mixture, it's kind of like what Dave was saying. The problem there was when you have irrigation for playgrounds and to get water rights anymore, you can't just go punch a well like you used to.
Right.
That would be the problem.
Did everybody hear that?
And it's a major floodplain. It has been for a long time.
Well, and then is that an optimal, I mean, then the other question is that an optimal site for middle school, elementary school? I mean, those are, I think that also factors in. I mean, in a perfect world, these elementary schools would be spread out and spaced out in an equidistant, place. I mean, I was down in the Tri-Cities. On Thursday and Friday, and just I wish that was the topography of the West Valley School District, but it's just not. And because they just have nice flat ground that the thing that they have to worry about is sagebrush and a little bit of rock from time to time. So, not hills and very expensive orchards that are producing a lot of apples and are making a lot of money for those farmers. So.
Now they get to rip out vineyards.
Exactly. We don't have any vineyards there. Anything else from the board members or anybody else in the audience?
I would just like to add one more thing. I'm listening. I kind of, Mr. Thorner raised some really good points. I applaud the work of the Facilities Committee. I think they did a lot of good work here, and all of these things, they certainly merit consideration, and should be. They should not just go away. I think we heard it over and over. The issue really is, what do we do in the short run? You know, what can we do right now that's fiscally wise, that's gonna give us what we need, and is gonna leave us some reserves for the future? I mean, this particular one, while it does do a lot of things for long-term, it's particularly expensive. And I just think until we get some unknowns answered, it's just a good, prudent move for us to try and consider something that we can do in the short term that gives us most of what we need if things happen. And things are evolving very quickly in this community right now. A lot of building going on, a lot of changes. Look at the things we're talking about right now in terms of even the structure of the educational model we want to use. I think the dust needs to settle a little bit more before we go with this kind of expenditure and look at it, you know, at a more feasible point. That being said, I'm still open-minded to a lot of things. I don't like to close the book and just say, no, I'm locked into one way. I like to consider things. But for what I see, at least speaking for myself in front of me right now, I think there's a stretch for us right now, just looking at it. But again, in a little bit of time, this might be a better move for us.
Right, and just a couple of points of clarification. So the recommendations, not to put words in Mr. Matthews' mouth, but the recommendations, and particularly recommendation Z, did not come from the Facilities Committee. They came from administration. So the various things.
No.
Z didn't come from.
I beg your
X and Y.
I beg your pardon.
Sorry.
Sorry. I strive for accuracy.
All due respect.
No.
You almost gave her the big one out there. You know that when you said that.
I apologize. X and Y came from administration. Z came from a board member. The Facilities Committee did not present us with any of these options. The Facilities Committee gave us recommendations about recommended adjustments at this time to designate developments that are the newer developments to schools that are not attached to, if you will, and to utilize Mountain View and Atanum as places that we have. So that's 1B, and then 2 is implement short-term construction projects and placement of portable classrooms on an as-needed basis. So those are the things that at least administration is trying to capture with X and Y. And I think that also in terms of trying to follow the Facilities Committee's recommendation, we've talked about potentially adding a wing at some point in time to White Hollow, should the need become necessary, additional portables. I think those are the types of things that the Facilities Committee is asking us to consider. And so as hopefully our funding becomes a little bit more clear, I, as a board member, would like to see that, yes, we might do some of these things that we've discussed this evening, but then in terms of looking at the longer term approach, maybe we need to be more actively and aggressively saving money to have a fund of money available for additional purchases of modular classrooms or more of a permanent wing at White Hollow, or Atanum is another school that could be, and Cottonwood also could be expanded from. The buildings are to the extent that they're able to.
Well, X and Y also involve the exact same neighborhoods. There's no difference. in
Right.
those neighborhoods. And so the only real difference is the decision on the portables that we kind of hashed through a little bit tonight, which was nice, but.
So on the timeline of this, forgive me, I lost a few papers, but we had a timeline that talked about forums, community forums for
January.
For January, okay. So At the last meeting on Wednesday, I think we agreed as a board that Z was not an option for this next school year, correct? We said we were gonna talk about it on Wednesday as, or at least in my words, a process of kind of thinking in terms of long-range planning and specifically having the board nail down what model we wanna see, K-4, K-5, you know, that kind of.
And hopefully assisting the facilities committee with
Right.
our thoughts on
Right.
that.
Okay, so I'm good there?
I think so.
Okay.
That's
So
just
then-
me, you're just having a
I'm just talking
conversation with
to
me
Mike
now.
right But any of the board members think
I
I'm
believe
wrong?
that's
Okay,
correct.
Okay, so that sounds good. Okay, so, then the next thing we need to do is, since Wednesday is really kind of an academic exercise, we need to, tonight, decide what we're gonna talk about it, or have our, what we're gonna present to the community as for a change, right? Whether we're gonna do X or Y.
Or a hybrid.
Or a hybrid, okay. So, when the board president is ready to have that conversation, or if we're there now.
I'm fine to have that conversation now.
Okay, so this is what I would recommend from my chair for the board to consider. I think we should, some of you should get, it's portable, with the understanding that we'll also have the funding for the boiler room demo and remodel and the library demo. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, that does sound amazing, doesn't it? Okay, Apple Valley doesn't want a portable. You sure about that?
She's biting her lip.
Yeah. Okay, and then move ahead with the boundary changes recommended by administration.
Did you say there was gonna be a small remodel though at Apple Valley?
If we
Yes.
need to do the library, yeah,
Well, and yeah,
Hold on,
to be determined.
hold on. Let Mr. Smith
Yeah.
finish here. It's hard to hear him. Go ahead.
okay, so what, yeah, part of what would happen in some of you is the boiler room remodel,
Okay,
okay, the portable,
okay,
and the demo for for having cut that library in half previously.
Restore it back to its
You
original.
take it back to its full size.
Okay,
And that gets some of you some breathing room in the short term. And that would, and then going along with the reboundary that administration recommended. That's my 2 cents, that's what I would like to see have happen. And the ballpark cost for that was, as we discussed, about $500,000 for all of that. And I still see Heidi sweating over there.
And I'm totally sweating. Sorry. I feel like we need to, I don't,
powwow?
yeah, I'm not sure I want to be the one who said, you know, I don't want my staff
Right.
to say, okay, you decided on this. I mean, we've talked about it in great length.
Yeah.
Again, I'm saying neither of them is wonderful, so.
Well, it's the lesser of two evils. And what you said at the meeting a little while ago, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay,
But-
because it needs to be decided.
But, you know, you said, look, I don't want to lose the library space,
Right.
but I like that more than getting portables. The only thing that I worry about, aside from the additional cost of a second portable at $350,000, is, you know, are we having this conversation 1 year from now? And not because Heidi said something and made a bad decision, because the board is deciding, and if anybody up here thinks that you need a portable now, then we can talk about that.
I think she needs a portable now.
Right, you're not up here.
I have to interject, I think that, Heidi, I think that you are trying,
To save us from what we've been doing for 6 years.
Yeah.
you and I have a normal that is not acceptable to anybody, anywhere else in the district. And you guys need a portable, you guys need space for your children.
Does getting a portable at Apple Valley, would it in any way take students from some of you? It wouldn't, would it? This reboundary wouldn't?
No, I mean, it would be housing for our current children. We wouldn't even need new children to house that. Because again, Danielle and Kelly share they have 2 classrooms in a room and a quarter. Not in 2 classrooms, a room and a quarter. Because they have accommodated themselves into that. So I could easily take one of their classrooms and put it in there. We have current classrooms that could fill that portable. Mr. Farina just asked, well, what about, because it's out in front, and we may not want a classroom in front, literally on the sidewalk, what if that was our office? I know you know, Tim and I did discuss that, and then our office can somehow be remodeled into 2 funky classrooms somehow, a possibility. You know, it just, everything is a domino effect, but no, you do see me, I mean, again, I don't know, I'm listening to my staff too and saying,
At
you're
least
right,
reserve
maybe.
the right for a few days to ask for it.
Here's my
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
is I hear Eva talking about how awful their library situation is, and it breaks my heart that that's
I
gonna
just had
happen to
no
our
idea.
library.
Well, I mean,
I
so,
mean,
Sorry.
Yeah.
a
So
library.
if you can wait till Wednesday and we can get, I mean, or do you know?
Yeah,
you know?
well,
Or go with
go
it,
ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
sorry.
No,
Sorry
well-
to be wavering, sorry.
well,
I would also like to throw out, I think that Heidi backed off on her portable so that we could get one.
Well, no, I mean,
I do, I think you did.
Well, because we've done all the other stuff too, and now she's in that same position, so. Just like she said, the normal at our 2 buildings is not normal for anybody else.
Okay, so I'll say this, and this will be my last 2 cents, because I've dominated for about 5 minutes.
No, that's okay.
But
Good questions.
I don't personally have a problem with proposing or having the board consider a portable at Summitview, a portable at Apple Valley, the remodel of the boiler room, and putting the library back the way it is. I don't. I think the need is real, it's a short-term fix. That brings us up to $850,000. Of what's probably true cost. What was presented before was roughly $700, but it didn't have the remodel and all that other stuff in there, so this is probably a closer number. And I say that, Heidi, because I really kind of had a hard time not putting that portable in there. I think you need a portable too.
You know, and my decision isn't based on cost at all, because I could say if it's $1 million, it is necessary for our children, so regardless. So mine is not based on cost, it really is based on what we have done as a building and the pragmatics of logistics of all of our children moving around. We're just adding one more in and out, but that's a big consideration, as they pointed out, with our library. And our library is a very different situation than Eva's, because it is larger, but yes, so then if you want to consider that, because like you, I mean, Mike and I said this, Mike said you could use it regardless. And so it's fair.
Okay.
even with 33 less children.
True, because you have to remember, 33 is a class only if they were all 4th graders, or only if they were all 2nd graders. It is only 2 or 3 kids from each class.
Here's what
grade
this
level.
does. This,
So it doesn't reduce.
yeah, the
a
boundary
class.
changes.
I got that.
The boundary changes are gonna deal with the here and now. But the portable at each school will still allow growth in those areas, but, you know, as they continue to, they're gonna still grow. But whether you take kids away from there or not, they're still gonna have kids grow. So it's gonna be a little bit more of a long-range plan, a little bit more of a long-range plan. It's not gonna be a lot more of a long-range plan, it's gonna be a little bit more of a long-range plan for both of them to have the portable. Option X. It's gonna give you a little bit more growth, because see, when I said we had 353, room to grow for 353 kids, that portable's 50 more, that portable's 50 more. That's now 453, which gives maybe a little bit, gives us some more time. With this rebounding, can give us a little bit more time. Maybe, and then we'll know the full impact of the new funding plan for the state of Washington. We'll know the impact of that, how it impacts us. We may want to do the non-voted debt and add on to White Hollow. We have 2 years before that development
ask about
impacts us.
that?
We might,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the White Hollow, I haven't been to every meeting, and I know that other people haven't either, and we're hearing that for the first time.
Well, it's been discussed for like the
Yeah.
last
No,
6 months.
I apologize. Can you just give us a quick, fill
When
us
we,
in
when we,
on-
when we look at what can we do to expand capacity to, as we're redirecting kids, what are some options? That is one, potentially, to the cost of about $1.8 million.
Moving kids to White Hollow?
No,
Adding
adding on, and then moving kids to White Hollow.
it'd be non-voted debt, and it'd be 1.8 million roughly. We could build 6 classrooms there in a wing that was started but not finished. That's what that is, Brandy. And then, you know, I mean, that's
And
another
that-
option down the road, you know, so. Because
Should
there is a
Yeah.
development coming in between 64th and 72nd it'll be in 2 years, so.
I mean, that's an option, and then do a different boundary adjustment and do no portables. That, you know, those are all of the things that are potentially circling around. But, so I'm sorry you're hearing about that for the first time,
No,
but.
I've heard bits and pieces about it.
But that's not on the,
But
that's
I
not,
didn't
but that's not on the,
understand
but that's not something that's feasible for us to do right now,
Today.
because,
We have space now.
well, we have
yeah.
space now, and then, I really don't like when I disagree with Mr. Smith, because he makes such a compelling, wonderful argument.
I practiced all day.
I know, right? I told Dr. Brophy this on late last week. I really understand. I really can appreciate the needs of, gosh, it would be nice to have 2 portables. I do. I'm spending nearly $1 million to do all of this when there's so much uncertainty, just gives me a lot of stress. And the modified proposal between X and Y, where maybe we only do 1 modular building at this time, is a little easier for me to get my head wrapped around than 2. If I had a lot of confidence in our state government, more confidence in our state government, then I might feel differently about it. There's always going to be something, and I get that. But it's a tremendous expense when we have other facilities needs that we have to address. And if we do all of those things at one time, all the rest of those facilities concerns do not, or would be in serious jeopardy of our ability to financially afford all of those things. And that's not to say that in a year from now, we cannot revisit a modular building at Apple Valley. We're doing something now in terms of creating, or at least not, I realize all 33 kids are not in one classroom, but we are doing something to alleviate some of the strain at
Per class.
per
yeah.
class at Apple Valley. Like I said, I don't want to be all completely driven by money, but it just causes me a great deal of stress.
So it looks better to you for some of you to do the demo in the library, get the portable and the boiler room.
I'd rather spend $500,000 than $1 million,
Than 850?
or $1 million.
You have a hand up. You have a hand up.
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm talking as a West Valley citizen, not as a principal of an elementary school. Construction costs go up exponentially every year. The cost of a portable is gonna go up the same way of a modular classroom. You're gonna do it now, you're gonna do it later, because you're gonna have to have the space between now and the time you can pass the bond and build schools. If you pass the bond right now, you're still 3 years out in building schools. We don't have the capacity to grow for 3 years with what we have. And you can ask Mr. Critchlow, 3 years ago, what would the cost of a portable been? $300,000 instead of $380,000. You know, I think the prudent thing is to do it now. And then you have the space that you need for 3 or 4 years where we can pass a bond and get 2 new schools built. And we're not gonna have to piecemeal together another big rebounding in our district in the meantime to try to fix a problem.
Wouldn't the counterpoint to that, though, be, just playing the devil's advocate,
Yes, sir. Good job.
to spend no money on portables and do the comprehensive reboundary now to really disrupt a lot of people? Because in theory, we don't have a capacity issue. We have, as Mr. Pryor says, and I'm giving him full credit, it's a student distribution issue.
But I think that the rebandering that we are going to do will help that.
I understand, but I'm just addressing the argument that you're making. You're going to do it now or later. You could do zero money and a comprehensive boundary review adjustment now. I'm just playing the devil's advocate. That doesn't mean that we're never going to have to expand our capacity at the elementary level, but that's the counterpoint to I think that's the counterpoint to the argument that we have enough room in our district now to house all the elementary students. It's just a matter of where they go.
And if I may, Ms. Adams, I think, looking into my crystal ball in the future, if you will, you know, if we go with the modified Y now, where some of you gets a portable at this point in time, and, you know, Heidi, if I throw you under the bus, I'm sorry, but, you know, I don't mean to. But I can foresee if the Citizens for Better Schools is successful in their bond endeavors, you know, Mr. Farina and Mr. Moore and they have talked to us about that and all that in the next 3 years. Well, then we're a couple more years out before we get a new school. You know, we'll get at least one, I hope. Summit View would be replaced. Given that we can build on that site and still run school there, we'd leave the portable there while the construction's going on. But upon the completion of that construction, we can move that portable out while we work on another bonding issue and give more capacity, if you will, to Apple Valley. It's not ideal by any means, but it would be another stopgap while we go to our community and hopefully convince them that the needs are there and show them a progressive plan on how we're gonna continue moving west and south. There's nowhere else to go as far as land and property for all these different things. And that's where the developments are going in now. And eventually, you know, some of us won't be alive when all this happens, I'm afraid, but there'll be more than one walking school in the district because the density is going to increase to the point where a lot of the other things we've talked about, impact fees and those kind of things, are going to come into play. And we will have to have provisions made for the incoming population, if you will. For what it's worth, just a thought.
So there's a reboundary way to spread out K4 in the existing buildings and have room in all of the buildings. And that's what I'm hearing. We have.
Well, no, there's no plan that's been presented to us to do that.
So why isn't there a plan to do that if it's possible? No portables, and everybody has a classroom. That's why. No portables. No, but be able to still fit everybody. I guess I don't get it. I'm hearing that there's places you guys are saying we don't have a containment issue, we have a distribution issue. Why didn't we come up with a plan that
That's Plan Y.
distributes, well?
That's Plan Y, no portables. But you're not gonna know 100%.
No.
But you're not gonna know 100% for sure, Amy.
Okay, that's what Mr. Thorne was talking about earlier.
Right.
As far as.
But this is
anxiety
moving
of not
kids,
knowing.
this is moving to existing moving kids into places we have and out of places that are crowded.
But both rebounding plans are the same.
They are. Mhm. But Y was one that was made to kind of say, let's wait and see. Let's see if just moving kids eases it enough to not have to do the portables.
I think what I'm referring to is something that has not been presented, where we basically take the map of the district and start completely over again. That has not been presented to us. To then fill up our buildings.
Have
Yes.
you asked for that?
Pardon me?
No.
We have not.
Has the board asked for that?
We haven't asked for that. We asked the facilities committee to help us address the short-term problems, and as you heard from Mr. Moore, they punted on that issue. To use
You
his
might want
words.
to say that again. I don't know if everybody heard that.
Or not Mr. Moore, but Mr. Matthews. I'm sorry. So I misspoke twice tonight. Mr. Matthews, so back in the spring, the board asked the facilities committee, they were charged with presenting us with a boundary adjustment. And Mr. Matthews told this board that they punted on that issue. And so then, I mean, I was asking for that last spring, or help asking for those ideas to be presented. Those, the recommendations are very good and helpful, but this is what's been presented to us.
So Michael, help me understand, since I sit on that facilities committee, you wanted the facilities committee to tell you how to reboundary the district?
Yeah, that was their number one task. Let me read. Let me find that sheet. The charge.
While you're looking for that, I'll mention that
An elementary school boundary assessment and recommendation report, boundary report with short-term and long-term recommendations to existing boundaries.
So would you say that this boundary proposal that's already in X and Y is a good one for convenience of alleviating the problems at those, at Summit View and Apple Valley? It's a, you know, to help out that situation.
Correct.
Kind of a Band-Aid boundary
Correct.
change. Okay, so it's great that you haven't ever had a boundary change in these last 7 years, but like you said, it's inevitable, it's actually quite common in other districts. If we're going to announce to parents and families and people and make a boundary change, is something that fixes this temporary problem that's more of a, I don't know, more of a smaller scale Band-Aid type fix, move, what is best, and then a few years later we have to do an even bigger or more drastic one, or is it something to where we could look at, if we're gonna shake it up and move you around, let's do it once and make it most effective for more of a longer term plan? Is that something that we are
I would not,
inevitably facing, or?
I would not do it now and try to do a larger scale one with the impending development that we don't know for sure in the way that order they're gonna fall. That's number one, Tasha. And number two, we would like to pass a bond issue, and if we pass a bond issue, we may have to do it again. So I would rather do something that's gonna be that's gonna try to relocate some of these the room we have left. Last Springs was 178 kids, okay? But that had some internal moves, like from Apple Valley to Cottonwood, and had Summit View to Apple Valley. We didn't do that in this plan.
No,
We moved it, and it's about it's about as dramatic without doing those. And does take newer places to go to schools that have room and try to alleviate problems where they're crowded.
which is good, as long as, when it's presented to the public, which, I don't know the process, I guess, for rolling out, boundary change, because last time so many issues of like PAL and other things were brought into the conversation.
Correct.
And it was muddied up with some of those themes, but maybe in January when these forms come out and these are, you know, necessary moves, kind of minor boundary type changes, when people are considering the levy or upcoming bonds, knowing boundary changes are once again possible for happening, or that this is final, like how is that worded to parents about how is this
Good question.
process of?
I've got a letter, in fact, last year, all the letters were stuffed in envelopes, 178. We didn't put stamps on, however, okay, which was a good move. So all of those people are notified in a letter, their existing elementary school and their new elementary school. And then we had identified with the principals where they're going, open houses on a certain date and time. So then those people are invited to an open house at the newly assigned school. They meet the principal, they meet the staff, and and that's an opportunity for them to learn about, that's the program similar to the program they're in, okay? And it's something I've done where I came from when we did it for 6 junior highs and 3 high schools and 18 elementaries. Did it for all of them. And so that process, kind of as an open house, alleviates the shock a little bit. But, you know, you still do provide for people to get to know the new school, the new teachers and all that. So we have that process ready to go. We'll have that ready to go for this boundary change as well.
Well, I like that better than having the parents have options to complain and do all this. It's kind
Correct.
Of, this is the new family
And I would
rule.
rather do it fast, I'd rather do it sooner than
Right.
January 22nd.
Well, before, that, like we said, that paperwork for the levy will come out the same week as the.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, here's the thing, and I think you know this, Tasha. And I said this the first night. If my kids or grandkids were in this district, I have no they could be in any classroom, it doesn't matter. And you can even go, I drive from school to school. If I go to school, based on the schedule, I can see a similar lesson presented at Apple Valley that I might see at Mountain View. We have a pretty set system of everything that we do. And so there's not a big change in program for anybody.
Yeah, no, I would hope that you would get no pushback on it. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make
And we
sure.
can grandfather some kids and make it work, you know, so, yeah.
If I can, if I may, Sasha, see, again, then that elephant comes back again, and the real elephant in the room is the bond. And it's the subsequent non-passage of the bonds is why everybody's in this room, and all those folks that are dealing with education, whether they thought they were involved with each one of those bond proposals or not, it's affected each and every one of us, including the 5 people up here, 6, 7, with my student cohort over here, and negatively. And that's why we're having to address these issues now. If our community, if we can convince them to step up and support our educational system, along with our staff, then I think we can successfully get to where we want to be along the lines of out-of-the-box thinking, if you will. Colin, Stephen, you want to talk?
Go ahead.
So this is a little bit of an out-of-the-box thought. You're talking about possibly doing 2 modular buildings. If those get placed at Apple Valley and Summit View in time for school to start, would there be enough capacity at those 2 buildings to wait to do the redistricting until next year after the levies run, and then be able to do it comprehensively enough to be able to last until after the bond is run? Or have at least the potential for that? Because you're talking about doing the modulars now anyway as a stopgap. Just a thought that I throw out there.
One anyway.
I don't know the answer to that question.
I think it's a loaded question. Honestly, I think it's a valid, very, very good question. But it's a loaded question, like on one side of my mind, I think absolutely. You give us a portable, so I'm kind of going back to my words yet. You give us a portable, you know, and absolutely, could we maintain for a couple of years? Yeah. The fear I have is, again, as most of you sat and then some of you didn't sit on this board, we have done this for years. And we have fought for years, we've advocated for years, we've begged, we've pleaded for years. And just like Mike just said, our community and our West Valley, even staff, are not convinced that 2 buildings in this district need something, whatever that is. And I'm worried too that now, because we have and you've all heard this from me, we have made it work. And look, you'll just make it work again. Now you buy a portable, you'll just buy another portable. We have always made it work. And maybe even I shouldn't have made it work for the last 5 years and just said, no, you know, your kids won't be able to attend here. Because we've made it work so long, I think people are convinced it's working. So on one hand, I'm fearful of that. Could we make it work? Yes. Then I'm fearful the message continues, you don't need it, you've made it work again. So that's just a comment I have. And I don't know that answer to our community beyond the people who continue to come to these meetings to help them understand it is not what is best for all those kids in those buildings, even though they do work their tails off and we make it work. I don't know. So that's why it's a loaded question in my mind.
And I have no idea how many kindergartners are gonna come through the door. I have, I think 28 identified right now just as siblings. If I am if this year was just a big year for an incoming class, and I can just move that 4-track through, probably 3rd grade, it would go back to 3-track just because of contractual numbers. But I have no way of knowing what's gonna come through with kinder, and there's so much building going on in my boundary area.
There is, they just opened up another 20 acres.
Right, and so, Summitview is not built to be a 4-track school.
No, it's not.
178 capacity in the gym, I have 350 students right now.
Well, and what Richard Pryor said makes, to me, a lot of sense. It's not that we don't have enough room, we don't have room in the right spots. And if you add a portable to Apple Valley and to Summitview, that's not guaranteed that that's gonna cover all the kids that are coming in, unless you're gonna shuttle everybody to those 2 schools to fill them up, you know. One of the things that we're missing also is secondary. I talked to a good friend of Dell at ESD today. We're getting a house in our area that is gonna house middle school, junior high, high school, high needs kids. I mean, these are kids that don't fit into regular classrooms.
Right.
And he said, you better watch out because you're gonna have some major challenges. And this is at secondary, we're not even talking about secondary. But these are secondary kids and we have no place to put them either. I mean, our spots at the secondary, at least when I was there, were full. And now you're getting an additional 15 kids that are high needs kids. What are you gonna do with them? That's gonna be another meeting that we're gonna sit here and talk about. What to do with those, we have no room for any of these situations. I totally agree with the 2 portables, not just in order, just to be safe, so we have them, so we have spots, but it's not gonna solve the problem of all of our kids, because not everybody who's overcrowded is at Summitview or at Apple Valley. They're throughout the district, so you can't guarantee that just putting those portables in is gonna solve our problems.
Well, it would be for 1 year is what I would suggest. Give you 1 extra year so that you can then get the levy passed before you aggravate people, as I
Well,
believe
and I totally agree with you on that, we talked about this before.
That just
We need to get that
exacerbates
in
the
a little
already
passed before we
minimized
irrigate.
capacity to do all of
So,
it. Squeezes it time-wise.
But then you're gonna aggravate them right, 2 years is not far from a bond.
Yeah, but it's further than the same year.
That's called kicking the can down the
There are
road,
still
Steve.
people complaining about the high school,
Doesn't work.
about the freshman campus still staying, so, and.
I've only lived here 3 years and I've heard all the complaints.
Right, so you agree then that 2 years is not
You
enough
haven't
years
lived
to
them all.
get past the
Right.
bond pass.
But 2 years is still more than the same year, and that's the time frame that I'm afraid is gonna take place.
Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore. Not Mr. Matthews, Mr. Moore.
So I wanted to address the comment about Ryan and punting on the first charge, and preface it with, I'm with the citizens group, Ryan is the facilities chair, and so I haven't been to a lot of those meetings, and I'm just really not fully aware of why that took place. I know you just briefly explained the last meeting, but one of the things I'm wondering, in just sitting back and listening and trying to absorb all the different facets of this, and what I spoke to last week, as far as at least trying to get a thread into the, a long-term plan with this is, and also understanding that, the budgetary question marks and funding, but Mrs. Adams brought up the fact that we used a consultant, paid consultant, last time we did a major district reboundary, and that was kind of new to me. I'm just wondering, in that, whatever we do, the 850 or the 500 or whatever, if we should factor in some dollars to, get an outside consultant to work with the facilities committee, to work with the district, and just to help tie some of this together, as far as, the educational needs, to what Dave's talking, what Dave with do it and put our heads together, the people in this room, that would be my first, that would be a suggestion to look at. Spending the resources necessary to at least, we put a plan out, it's an XY hybrid, and be able to tell the voters and the taxpayers that are going to be asking for money, this is how we're addressing the issue moving forward, and this is our plan. We don't have the answers yet, but at least we have a strategy to address this long term. So that would be my first comment. The second comment that I feel passionately about, and I know it's critical of the district, but for me, the presentation of this to the people that are impacted and to the rest of the community really needs to be at a level that is up to our the expectations of our district. And the packet that is presented is hard to follow. It's black and white copies. It's drawn. I really don't want to get too far into it, but it's hard to follow. And so if we're going to move forward with Plan XY hybrid, well before the January meetings, I think we should. I think the district should spend the resources necessary to put together a very clear and concise, graphical depiction of what's happening, and that ties to also the, that shows parents, not just, in words or in text, but I mean, people identify with that. It's just hard for me to put back and forth and that sort of thing. So it's going to make our jobs easier, I believe, if we have a little better communication from the district out to the parents. That's, they can look at it. They don't have to try and interpret it. It's just that. And so that to me would, those are my few thoughts. Again, I don't want to be critical of anybody, but it's hard to piece this together. So.
The one thing missing, Michael, is the names and addresses and showing where people live. But since it hasn't been adopted, I haven't put that in the packet, because it's people's individual citizens' names and addresses would be in that packet as well.
I'm just asking for something.
Behind each of those maps would be the names and addresses of everybody impacted.
No, I think he's.
Yeah, if you had something like this, where it would pull out this block and change the color to show
Like
what's
a
where you're
graphic.
going to. He's looking at a
Of
graphic.
what it was and what it's
And what it's
going
gonna
to be, like all in
Okay.
one, just something that.
Yeah, the names are not relevant. It's
I
the
don't think you put names or
no.
No,
Yeah.
it's
And
areas.
Professional communication of it. That was one of the things in the survey from last year after Bondale, was the communication it didn't get high marks, and most people don't get any communication. So that's, if we can upgrade the communication and really present this well, then the community buys onto it, and it's not a pushback thing, they buy on, they support it, and then on the next bond issue, we have more people that are behind the district.
I'm gonna let somebody that hasn't spoken to us
I
first.
just wanted to say that was my concern, and that's why I'm here, is because when I look at it online or when I read it, I get really concerned as a parent how it's gonna affect me and why is this happening, and I've come here tonight and I understand where you're coming from now, and it makes a really big difference, but none of that came through in the newsletters or anything like that. You care about our kids, but I don't feel that as a parent when I'm reading these things, and so if that could somehow come through, I think that people would, be more likely to.
So since you're a new voice to this, please say your name.
I'm sorry, Cheryl.
Cheryl, and your last name?
Timothy.
Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for saying what you just said. I know it's, and thank you to everybody that's come out tonight and trying to get your head wrapped around this. I really, I, speaking for the board, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Good job.
I'd just like to say thank you to Mike Brophy. A month and a half ago, I felt like we're treading water. We had no idea what we were gonna do. And us options. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to see an X, Y, and a Z. So we actually had something to talk about, because we didn't have anything to talk about before. Now we have X, Y, Z, and we can change a little bit out of one or do the other, but at least we have options now, Michael, so thank you.
You bet.
So I just wanted to speak real quick to why it was that the facilities committee punted. It was because we didn't have enough data. And as you may or may not remember, when we presented, or when Ryan presented at Summit View, he recommended verbally, not in writing in the packet, that the board consider hiring the city of Yakima to map the students so that we could have the data necessary to do the divisions and redistricting.
I'm sorry that my words sounded critical, because they did sound critical about the punted. But a question that was asked is a legitimate one: did we ask for something? And the answer was yes.
Yep.
Now, we have to consider whether it's in these recommendations, in hiring outside consultants. How do we spend our money wisely? That's the heart. That's at the heart of this entire conversation. That's at the heart of my concern about 2 portables or 1. And again, the least expensive is not necessarily the best.
To that point, I'd also be open to an option of moving with the Summit View demo and bringing back the library and the boiler room and a portable, a remodel of Apple Valley now, and hold up on the portable for 1 year.
In my mind,
Because in a year,
in my mind,
Mr. Thorner, we could say, you know what, we can't afford it now.
right.
Or we're in a good spot, we can go ahead
Right.
and do it.
That was kind of where in my mind, that made a little bit more sense to me. Understanding that the nice folks from Apple Valley, we're not holding them to anything tonight, and we're having a conversation about what way we're leaning. But again, I don't mean to be the one that's dominating the conversation, because Mr. Jager said that he supports 2 portables. I think you were thinking 1. Okay.
Well, I think as a student, I would want them to have the second portable, because when I was in elementary school, I lived in the library. If they have to cut their library in half, I don't know what I would have done in the 3rd grade, because every lunch recess, I was in there with a book every day. Like, my teacher had to pull me out of there and be like, go make friends. And I was like, no, I'm going to read another book. So that's just my perspective. I think we should do 2.
See, but now, Chloe, that's your library sitting in front of you.
Not true. Not the same.
That's good perspective.
I didn't find any magic tree house on
Well, when that's good perspective, and when a few months ago, when we were talking about eliminating the library further from West Valley, I was having a hard time with that. I'm still not in love with the remodel at Apple Valley, but at least we're not completely.
All our kids should read.
Yes, thank you. So again, it's it's the lesser of 2 evils. It's, there's no great solutions here, or even a portable's not a great solution for Apple Valley. So, yeah.
Just again, in closing, and I know, sorry, you hear a lot from us, but it's, with all due respect too, so I do say this, but it is a prioritization, and I guess that is a concern to hear. I understand where the legislature is on our funding, totally understand. In our building, we have to prioritize needs, wants, everything as well. This, to me, is not a want. It never has been. These are needs. I think there are things funded by our district that are wants. And I say this, and I am going to say I am not by any means giving you any inclination that our coaches would be one of those, because I know that's one that's on the table to look at for the benefit. So please understand understand that. However, there are other programs in our district that are things that are, to me, I've called them bonuses, and everything that I think, this is a need. We have to house the children in our district. That is we are owed to house the children in our district. And to say, oh, we'll just kind of wait and see and we'll have to keep accommodating, that's just, to me, that is a higher priority than maybe some of the other things. We can't afford that, but we'll make sure we do some of these other things. That's a real hard thing to swallow. And maybe that's harder for us because we live in that world than it is for parents of Cottonwood and people at the other buildings. And I only say Cottonwood just because it was the first building in my mind. But to me, this, if I were to, and I hope our community can prioritize things.
But what do we do with the rest of the facilities needs other than the ones that we're just addressing right now?
No, great question. And this is my own personal thing, is that because this hasn't happened in the last 5, 8, 10 years, we're at this position. We are totally behind the 8 ball. And again, I think what maybe Brandy, and I'll speak for her, is to hear White Hollow getting a wing, and we haven't, possibly, but even hearing it, you just have to understand our ears. And we can't pass a bond to help our 2 buildings, and we may or may not get a portable, but you know what? We might put a wing somewhere, and I respectfully say might. We get it, these other buildings are falling apart, but that's just something that's happened throughout the years in this district, that to let our 2 buildings get to the way that they've been. And that's nobody's fault. That's just what's happened in our, district. So I understand that.
So now you really want that portable?
I want our community to really understand something has to change. Yes.
I'm kind of torn
Soapbox, sorry, but.
by your
Well, and our
earlier
facilities
comment.
would be, without Tim and his crew and the custodians that we
Sorry,
have,
Mark.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
our schools would be completely falling apart. Summit View is a rock-solid building. It's got its 1950 whatever issues, but it's a rock-solid building because of the hard work that everybody has put into it. It's just too small for the kids that are there. We just need, Susan phrased it so well last week. We just need more space for our children.
I'm kind of really torn with what Heidi said, because it's a very difficult choice in the sense that if you put that other portable in the community, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The first thing they're going to say is, we can make do with this. And so it lessens their perception of the need for what we need in a bond. At the same time, too, the other part that's a real consternation for me is if we wait and it turns out we need the portable, those costs are just gonna do nothing but go up. And that's to me, that's the real difficult part. So I don't know without tipping my hand there, but I really wanna look at that second portable real hard, because it's, pay me now or pay me later, and if we pay later, it is gonna be more.
I think a lot of it too might be how you spin it with the community when you present it, like he was saying. If I as a parent was told, we're doing everything we can to make sure these kids have space, but we need your support for this levy, this bond. We have, the things we're doing are all we can do right now, and they are not long-term. Help us understand that. But if you're gonna say, we're doing all we can for our kids, but you didn't get a portable, it goes both ways. I can say, oh, well, you got your portables, okay, it's fine, but that tells me, it really is how you spin it. We've done everything we could, but it's still not enough. Then, I don't know. I think it's how you spin it to the community is more of not what, we'll hold back on this because we need these things to pass, or we're doing what we can, but it's still not enough. So I still want to know that the kids are taken care of now, but that they aren't taken care of for very long, or they're still in a situation that's less than perfect. Like being more real about that rather than, I don't know, rather than the cost of it, or we decided to save this money for this, but we still need you to, I think it comes down a lot to the presentation and to, if you're gonna say we're doing all we can for our kids, did we at the time? Or we can't do anything more for our kids until this passes. How can I help? I don't know.
I know this is not the right thing to say, but to me, building a portable is an embarrassment to the community.
You need a school.
at the middle school, we put it behind a fence so nobody could see it. And at White Hollow, it's behind a fence so nobody could see it. I think we need to figure out some way to tell parents that we're putting in portables because we have no choice for right now. But we really do need to build. We really do need to build, and West Valley should be proud enough to pass levies to build buildings rather than put in portables. And I'm not sure how you get that across to people. But
Well, that was perfect, well said, I would agree with that if I was a parent and heard that coming from a board member.
They talked about that with the high school, when we had the 3 portables. I taught him one of them. If we would've just plugged them right out there, we could've passed it on for the high school a lot faster. Who knows? They were hidden over by the football field. But those portables are now being used at Summitview, at the middle school, maybe White Hollow? Junior high. So they did get reused. I mean, they were definitely 6 classrooms at the high school for several years, and now are being used daily somewhere else.
they're pieces of crap.
They have heating and air conditioning and whiteboards and Wi-Fi and phone. I mean, they work. They're a viable space.
Okay, so it's 8:15. I'd kind of like to kind of wrap us up a little bit here. Wednesday night we're going to talk about options Z, and that's going to be, I think, more of a philosophical discussion in terms of help. That's all right. I've misspoke twice tonight, and
I was
then we
asking
have
Siri
this.
what we ought to do.
Well, exactly. That's a professional opinion.
Yeah.
You were checking a football game.
So Wednesday night we're going to talk about option Z, and I'm looking forward to that discussion because I think it's going to help. I think it's going to help our facilities committee get. It's going to help with our long-term facilities plan, or at least it's going to be the start, hopefully, of a good discussion that way. And so I think that's good. If it's okay with the board members, we've had great discussion tonight. I really appreciate it. I'd like to maybe take an hour or so on option Z, and then I'd like to come back to where the board is leaning with what we're going to do here in the short term on Wednesday night.
Okay, so the timeline of this is, we're gonna give a recommendation to, or we let administration know what we're doing and then the forums, or the forums
Yes.
happen and then we?
No, I think we let administration, in my mind, we let administration know where we're leaning. That goes out, and that then will be presented at the community forums as to what we're leaning.
Okay.
And then we take comment from the public on that, and then we make our final decision in January.
January after the 22nd forum?
Yes.
At that forum?
No, at the last board meeting, just like we published originally.
Which is January?
Whatever the last business meeting is in January.
Okay.
So when you say leading, you are referring to prioritizing one to a X, Y, and Z, or going in one direction with it?
No, what direction are we going to present to the public? What are we going to present to the public as
This is what we're thinking.
this is what we're thinking, and then we take a final vote at the last meeting in January.
See, that way we'll give direction to the administration so they can facilitate the communication
Ahead of those meetings.
ahead of them, right?
That makes sense.
So that
Okay,
our,
so administration's gonna find out January 22nd then?
No.
That's what I got here.
Well, administration is going
we'll
to
find out Wednesday.
is going to find out Wednesday what direction we're leaning.
Okay.
So then, in the community forums, we alongside with Dr. Brophy will present.
Conversation, okay.
We'll present. Here are the boundaries that are going to be moved. Here's we're gonna and here are the dollars that we are going, here are the boundaries that are gonna move and the dollars that we're gonna spend, and here's what we're spending those dollars. Here's what we propose to spend those dollars
So there
on.
will be a spring, in a sense, a springboard proposal that goes to the forums.
From the,
Right.
from the board.
Right, correct.
Does that sound,
Yeah, no, I got it. I was having a hard time, but I got it.
is that okay with the rest of the board members?
Yes.
Okay,
Sounds good.
all right. Again, I just like to say on behalf of the board, I think everybody in the room almost spoke tonight, and I'd like to thank everybody for participating and coming out tonight. And we'll see everybody hopefully on Wednesday.
Where?
Oh,
Auditorium.
at the auditorium.
Right.
Although this room was really nice.
Okay. Mrs. Timothy.
Whoa, stop. Hold on. Can we do, is it possible to do it, Mrs. Cronister, is it possible to do this again in here? I really like this room.
On Wednesday.
I'll check, I have to check with
Yeah, she has to check with facilities.
Okay.
Nice, so.
Did everybody like this room better than the auditorium?